When 70-year-old Thomas opened his cabin door that frozen morning, just as the world was resting in the quiet glow of the Christmas season, he found two tiny snow leopard cubs freezing to death on his porch. He knew he shouldn't interfere with wild animals, but watching them die wasn't something he could do, especially not during this time of year. What happened next would change everything. It was early morning in the frozen wilderness. Thomas, a former park ranger in his 70s, had been living alone in his remote cabin for 15 years. He was dozing in his chair when he heard something unusual, a faint, desperate cry cutting through the winter silence. He cracked open one eye, then carefully stood up and approached the door, sensing the cold seeping in through every gap. He pulled the door open, slowly, squinting against the dim light and harsh wind. Right there on his porch sat a baby snow leopard, shaking and barely larger than a domestic cat, with ice coating its coat and ears flattened against its small head. It was silent now, simply sitting there trembling. Thomas gazed at it, his heart pounding rapidly in his chest. He understood he shouldn't interfere with wild creatures, but this tiny one appeared nearly frozen solid, completely alone, and about to give up. He remained there briefly, uncertain what to do. Then the cub swayed and nearly toppled over, and his natural instincts kicked in. He pushed the door open further and moved aside. The small creature paused, then staggered forward on frozen paws. As it entered, Thomas noticed movement in the snow past his porch. A second cub. This one was hardly moving, pulling itself gradually through the thick snow as if every movement took all its strength. "Oh, damn," Thomas muttered quietly, snatched his jacket and gloves, and headed toward the other cub. It gave out just before he reached it. With careful hands, he lifted it up, surprised by how weightless and delicate it seemed despite his calloused hands. He returned to the heated cabin. Shutting the door firmly after him, he carried both cubs to the back room, where his ancient wood stove was burning. He placed towels on the ground, bundled the cubs up, and began carefully massaging warmth back into their small frames. One produced a gentle whining noise. The other remained motionless, but he could watch its chest rising and falling. He remained beside them, talking quietly, monitoring their breathing, and setting out little bowls of water. The space grew warmer as time went by, and Thomas hardly moved from their side. He replaced the towels when they became damp from thawing snow and body warmth, and refilled the water when small tongues brushed the rims. Their eyes remained dull with tiredness, but one of them, the tinier one, began moving nearer to the flames. It no longer appeared frightened of him. Actually, when Thomas extended his hand near it, it pressed its small head against his palm briefly before sleeping again. His late wife had always said he had a soft heart for animals. It wasn't until midday that he allowed himself to calm down. The cubs were surviving. Thomas observed them from several feet back, sipping hot coffee. He questioned where their mother had gone. He also questioned if he had just created a problem that would bring the wilderness's fury straight into his home. He didn't need to question much longer. That evening, right after the final light vanished from the sky, something scratched softly against the rear door. Thomas went still. The noise repeated quiet, constant, not panicked. He rose up and moved to the kitchen window. What he witnessed made his blood freeze colder than the temperature ever had. A mature snow leopard stood beyond, her fur blanketed with snow, her frame skinny and trembling. Her eyes reflected the moonlight and shone golden. She gazed directly at the cabin, ears raised, body pressed low and tight. Thomas remained motionless. Carefully, he opened the back door slightly. The wind rushed through. The snow leopard didn't snarl or advance. She remained completely still, as though anticipating. He stepped backward, leaving the door partly open. From the side room, the cubs produced a few gentle crying noises. Within moments, the mother acted elegant and quiet. She entered through the door, and went straight to the room where her babies waited. Thomas observed from the corridor. She wrapped around them, touching and cleaning their heads. They reacted instantly, moving into her warmth. He sensed his chest constrict, not with alarm, but with something far more delicate, a type of amazement. She hadn't struck. She hadn't fled. She had trusted him sufficiently to track the smell of her cubs into a human dwelling. He questioned what despair must have pushed her to permit that. He shut the door softly, not wanting to bother them. The following morning, Thomas placed a few pieces of remaining venison on a ceramic dish just outside the bedroom entrance. Hours afterward, when he returned, the dish was cleared, the water dish as well. The storm intensified that afternoon. Wind screamed through the trees and snow struck the windows with constant pressure. Thomas stayed inside, tending the fire and listening to the occasional sounds from the side room. For 2 days, he continued that routine. Quiet footsteps, fresh food and water, and a careful balance of being near and keeping distance. By the second night, something had shifted. When Thomas approached with food, the mother snow leopard no longer backed away. She observed him, her golden eyes calm, her frame loose but watchful. There was comprehension in her expression, perhaps not confidence, but a peace, a truce. Snow accumulated high against the cabin sides, covering the porch stairs entirely, but within there was heat, existence, and an unanticipated sense of bond. On the third morning, the sky cleared into a brilliant blue, and quiet blanketed the wilderness. The storm had ended. Light streamed through the windows, sharp and pure, illuminating every particle of dust in the air like drifting stars. Thomas positioned himself before the cabin's front door and peered out. The snow glittered beneath the sun, and everything seemed strangely sacred. When Thomas pulled the door open that day, the room was vacant. No sign, just some loose fur and paw marks in the snow, heading back toward the woods. He remained in the doorway for an extended time, his breath forming clouds in the cold, questioning if any of it had truly occurred. He lowered himself slowly, fingertips brushing the dim outline of a paw mark pressed into the softened crust of snow just past the doorway. It hadn't been imaginary. Sorry for the interruption. Before we go forward with the story, I respectfully ask you to like the video and subscribe to this channel. It is very important for us. Thank you very much. The fur caught in the blanket was genuine. The bowls were still cleaned thoroughly. Something holy had entered his life and disappeared before it could be completely grasped. But the snow leopards were untamed. They had gone back to their realm, and he stayed in his. 2 different realms that had briefly connected like threads in the breeze. Spring arrived gradually and gently. Thomas resumed hiking again, searching for signs of the snow leopards. Occasionally he discovered tracks, faint claw scratches, or a clump of golden fur snagged on a shrub, but never the cats directly. Still, Thomas sensed them observing. He talked aloud during those hikes softly and without anticipating a reply. "I'm doing fine," he would mention. "Thanks for visiting." Then, one afternoon in early March, everything changed. Thomas traveled deeper than typical, tracking the climb of a thin ridge. The day felt wrong somehow. Too quiet. No bird calls, no rustling. Just the crunch of his boots and an unsettling silence that pressed against his ears. He reached a rough slope covered with loose stones and gravel. As he began descending, his boots slipped on a hidden patch of ice. His arms flailed, grasping at nothing but air. He tumbled hard, his body slamming against rock and ice, each impact stealing his breath. When he finally stopped, pain exploded through his leg like white-hot fire. A grunt tore from his throat. He tried to stand, but his ankle folded beneath him with a sickening crack that echoed through the empty canyon. The sound made his stomach turn, broken, definitely broken. He dragged himself to the nearest tree, his injured leg trailing behind him like dead weight, leaving a dark streak in the snow. Every movement sent waves of agony through his body. He propped himself against the rough bark, gasping. His coat pulled tight around his shaking frame. No phone, no signal. No one knew where he was. The reality hit him like another fall. He could die here. The sun was already sinking behind the ridge, and shadows crept across the snow like reaching fingers. Temperature dropping. Fast. Thomas's hands trembled as he tried to stay calm, but panic clawed at his chest. He slapped his cheeks hard, trying to stay awake, but the cold was seeping into his bones. His eyelids grew heavy. The pain became distant, almost dreamlike. That's when he heard it. A soft crunch in the snow, deliberate, close. His heart hammered against his ribs. He forced his eyes open, squinting through the growing darkness. A shape emerged from the shadows between the trees, low to the ground, moving toward him with purpose. Thomas's breath caught in his throat. It was her, the mother snow leopard. She stood just a few feet away, her eyes gleaming in the dying light fixed directly on Thomas. Behind her, two larger shapes materialized from the darkness. The cubs, no longer small and helpless, now lean, powerful, wild. Thomas's pulse raced. Were they here to finish what nature had started? The mother stepped closer, her movements slow and measured. Thomas couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The snow leopard circled him once, sniffing the air, her golden eyes never leaving Thomas's face. Then she stopped, looked directly at him, and in that moment, something passed between them. Recognition, understanding. The snow leopard turned sharply and trotted away into the darkness, but then stopped, looked back, waited. Thomas's heart pounded. What was she doing? The snow leopard returned, circled Thomas again, closer this time, more insistent, then rushed off again toward the ridge, and again she stopped, looked back. Thomas realized with a jolt she was trying to show him something. No, not show him mark his location. The snow leopard was creating a pattern in the snow around his fallen body. Deliberate circles again and again, a signal. Then, as suddenly as they appeared, all three vanished into the darkness. Thomas sat alone in the crushing silence, his breath coming in short gasps. Had he imagined it? Was the cold making him hallucinate? Minutes crawled by like hours. Or maybe it was hours. He couldn't tell any more, his vision blurred, consciousness slipping away, the cold pulling him down into darkness. Then a sound, faint at first, mechanical, distant, growing louder engines, voices cutting through the night. Over here. I see tracks. Flashlight beams swept across the snow. Thomas Coleman, can you hear us? Two rescue workers in bright orange gear crashed through the trees, moving fast. We got a call from the ranger station, one of them said, kneeling beside him, already checking his pulse. Some hikers reported seeing something strange. Animal tracks circling one spot over and over. They said it looked deliberate, like a marker. The other worker wrapped a thermal blanket around Thomas's shoulders. They thought something was wrong. They were right. Thomas's eyes drifted toward the dark ridge where the snow leopard had stood, where she had waited, where she had made sure Thomas would be found. She was gone now. Back at the cabin, weeks later, his leg bandaged and healing, Thomas sat on his porch as the sun began to set. He never told anyone what really happened. How could he? Who would believe that a wild animal had deliberately saved his life? But he knew those tracks weren't random. They were purposeful, circular, relentless, a map drawn in snow around his fallen body, a message that someone had finally understood. One evening in late August, as golden light painted the clearing, Thomas looked up and froze. There, at the edge of the trees, stood the mother snow leopard, healthy, strong, powerful. Beside her, the two young cats, now nearly full grown. One had a faint mark above its left eye, the same cub that had pressed its tiny head into his palm that winter night. The snow leopard stared at Thomas across the clearing, Not with fear, not with aggression, but with knowing. Thomas rose slowly, one hand gripping the porch rail for support. He didn't speak, didn't move closer, just stood there letting the silence say everything words couldn't. "Thank you," he finally whispered so quietly the words barely existed. The snow leopard's tail flicked once, then she turned and melted into the forest, her children following like shadows. Thomas remained on the porch long after they disappeared, his chest tight with emotion he couldn't name. He had saved their lives. They had saved his. And somewhere in the wild heart of the forest, that debt had been repaid. The circle was complete. It truly was a real Christmas miracle. Did you enjoy this story? If you were in Thomas's position that winter morning, would you have opened your door to those freezing cubs, knowing it might put you at risk? Yes or no? Tell us in the comments below if you enjoyed the story. Subscribe to this channel and leave a like. Thanks so much for watching. See you in the next video. Have a wonderful day.